in the process of learning the local language of the specific people group we live amongst. And I asked the person who was kind of teaching me, what are the three things you think of when you think of your religion, your worldview, this animism? And they said blood, fear, and sacrifice. Those were the three words that they used to describe the first thing that comes to mind. If you were to ask me that question, it would be the exact opposite. I would think, man, grace and mercy and kindness that we have in Christ.
Jesus never promised his followers an easy path. In fact, he told his disciples that the world would hate them. He sent them out as sheep among wolves. Jesus' words came true in the life of the apostles, and they're still coming true today in the lives of his followers around the world. Join host Todd Nettleton as we hear their inspiring stories and learn how we can help. Right now on the Voice of the Martyrs Radio Network.
Welcome again to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio. My name is Todd Nettleton. We are in the studio today in Bartlesville, Oklahoma with Brother Kevin. If you're a longtime listener to Voice of the Martyrs Radio, you know many of our guests don't have last names as far as VOM Radio goes. Brother Kevin is another of those. He is serving in Asia, and we will talk about his call. We will talk about how he ended up there. Kevin, welcome to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
It is great to have you. Talk about how you ended up in Asia. You're not Asian.
No.
But you live there, you work there, you minister there. How did God lead you in that direction?
I had grown up in Texas and wanted to pursue a career in the military and spent a lot of time thinking about the plans that I had made for myself that I think I convinced myself that were God's plans. But, really in college began to be challenged to lay those things down before the Lord. And when I did that, it became clear that that is not what he had for me. Started working at a local church and pursuing what I thought would be full-time vocational ministry in the States. And I met my wife in March of 2010. And on our first date, she said, in October, I'm moving to Cambodia for a year.
You better date fast or
right.
not date at all.
We dated fast. We got engaged about a week before she left. So she spent a year in Cambodia through a number of different situations and avenues and pathways. The Lord just drew my heart to the nations, and I got to visit her while she was over there. I started doing seminary and kind of getting prepared to go. And we both just fell in love with Southeast Asia and had a friend ask us about a particular country we had not thought of or heard of or paid attention to in any way. But the more we learned about that, the situation there, the more it became clear that, this is exactly what we felt like the Lord put on our hearts, to be amongst the unreached, to be in a place where not many others had gone previously. And so we were blessed to be able to get to launch in 2014.
As we think across Southeast Asia and Asia more generally, there's different sort of levels of closeness and openness. How hard was it as a Westerner and as a Christian to say, hey, I want to come live in your country?
Yeah, they are what we would classify as a closed country, meaning they are not friendly to missionaries. You can't be a missionary. So we had to come in under what we call a platform. Which is essentially a business that we work at that provides us and issues us a work permit and a visa and these other type things that allow us to live there in country. But our missionary work is not anything we can do openly or publicly. And so we now opened a business in 2016 that we operate that allows us to live and work there, especially in the region we live in, a way that is legal and is legitimate, but also gives us the access to do the stuff that is not public that we get to be a part of.
How often do the people there look at you as an American and say, well, what are you doing? Like, why are you here?
Yeah, we got those questions a lot. Where we live, it does not make a lot of sense for an American to move there, and especially in the place that we live in country. So there were a lot of questions, but, people understand business, people understand money, and so being able to just have a public identity as a businessman who runs and operates a business, and it's a legitimate business that does what it says it does. I think people began to understand that, that's kind of why we're here. And it might not make sense to them, but it kind of placates their curiosity to some degree. But I think there'll always be a bit of behind the scenes, what are these people doing here?
We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Brother Kevin. He and his family live and work and minister in Asia. Kevin, you mentioned you're in a closed country. I know it's a place where the government doesn't necessarily want the church to grow. There is also some religious aspects to persecution. At the village level, when someone comes to Christ and they face persecution, A, what does that look like? And B, what's driving the persecutors? What's motivating them to come against the gospel?
There are two predominant worldviews where we live, Buddhism and animism. And Buddhism makes up the majority of the population. So it is, in many respects, a Buddhist country. And the particular form of Buddhism is very Epicurean. And so there is this deity, this force, this God, this being, these powers that are very distant. And they don't really interact with us. We don't really interact with them. But if we kind of do the right things and live a certain way, then we can have life and wealth and prosperity and all these kind of things. And so there's a huge gap between the spiritual forces at work and your normal everyday life. On the other hand, the minority population, certainly where we live especially, is animist. And so they don't identify as Buddhist. They identify as those who we worship the spirits. And, it's interesting. We live in a village where they will do animal sacrifices, where they will consult witch doctors and spirit doctors. It took me a while to understand the persecution side of it. When someone becomes a believer where we live, when persecution happens, it's not because they become Christians. None of these people know what Christianity is. They've not heard the gospel. They've never heard of Jesus. And you say, well, then why are they being persecuted?
Right.
We have to remember we have been so deeply shaped and formed here in the West, so in Western Europe, especially in North America, from scientific discovery, Newton, Darwin. We have such a historical legacy of things that shaped our philosophy. And it's so ingrained into our world that we don't really even notice it or think about it. And so one of the manifestations of that is we're very individualistic of it here. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It can be bad. But we ask questions like, where do I want to go to college? What do I want to do as a career? Who do I want to marry, right? And again, these are good questions,
right?
But they have been, admittingly, largely shaped by things like the Enlightenment and Western culture and ideology. And we just need to accept that that's a reality. Whereas over in Asia, a very different situation. They are what we would say more collective in their ideology and in their social interactions. And so if you can imagine, living in a village and all of you are participating in these spirit sacrifices to the spirits. If we don't do this, then the rains won't fall on our rice and grandma will get sick. And if you can imagine, then someone just decides to completely check out of that. And they say,
not doing that anymore.
I don't want to be a part of that. Right. They don't know why they've stopped doing it, but what they do know is this is an affront to all of us. You've now put the entire community at risk because what you do affects all of us. Because we have this very collective way of thinking. The consequences of this is not the rain won't fall on your rice field. It's not going to fall on all of our rice fields. It's not that your grandma is going to get sick. It's all of our grandmas are going to get sick. And so there is this threat to the community that they have to respond in one of two ways. Either you have to recant, and the pressure will come in. 9 out of 10 will not endure when that pressure, either from the authorities, from the village, from family, they're going to say, I'm out. And they are that seed that falls on the rocks, that sprouts up, and then is scorched by the sun. And so if that doesn't happen, then the next step, kind of in the iteration of what persecution looks like, is they need to be removed from the village. And that can happen in a number of ways. Typically, it takes the form of houses being burned, disassembled, driven out of the village, threatened. I mean, you name it. I mean, it really can be a spectrum of response. But it's all kind of happening based on this social and cultural set of norms that become threatened. And we have tons of friends and good relationships with people who've experienced some really, really terrible things. But those who endure, man, they are such an encouragement and a blessing to us and minister to us as we minister to them. It's an amazing place, and the people there are just serving and loving the Lord and they're risking it all.
So it seems like a very fear-based,
Very much so.
spiritual practice. Like,
Yes.
I'm afraid of all the spirits, so I got to
That's
do
exactly right.
whatever makes them happy.
Yeah, I remember I was in the process of learning the local language of the specific people group we live amongst. And I asked the person who was kind of teaching me, what are the three things you think of when you think of your religion, your worldview, this animism? And they said blood, fear, and sacrifice. Those were the three words that they used to describe the first thing that comes to mind. If you were to ask me that question, it would be the exact opposite. I would think, man, grace and mercy and kindness that we have in Christ.
As Christians, we have blood to talk about.
Right, we
the
have blood
of
and
Christ,
sacrifice.
And we have sacrifice
But
to
it's
talk
cast
about.
out all fear, right?
Right,
That's
to
right.
cast away fear.
That's right.
So it's interesting how those, almost like a mirror image of each other, but the darkness and the light.
That's right.
We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Brother Kevin. He is a gospel worker living and working in Asia. Are there some specific stories that you can share with us about what some of our brothers and sisters have gone through?
We have friends who are in prison. We have friends who have been kicked out of their village. We have friends who are living in tents because they've been displaced. Man, they say things like, for the joy set before me, I get to endure this. And they use this language that I just wasn't expecting someone to be experiencing persecution to respond to it with such faith and perseverance. And the way the Lord is strengthening them, it strengthens us.
We talked about at the village level, they're going to kick you out. They don't want you there. Prison says the government's getting involved now because they're locking you in jail.
Yeah, well...
So does the government kind of support the village people who are persecuting, or do they get involved at a sort of a separate level? Or
So at a federal level, their hands are not in a lot of it. They don't want to create some international human rights incident. And so they kind of, it's the village and district level.
Okay.
And so the jails, the prisons are going to be kind of controlled at the district level. They can be doing these things with, the national government having zero knowledge. And so the vast majority of the persecution is happening. The majority of it is at a village level, but it can go up to the district, and it's very easy for them to just kind of do what they want without any kind of repercussion
Without oversight. Really.
Yeah.
So really, in that situation, the Christian has no one to appeal to.
They don't, and that's part of what we're hoping to be a part of how we can strengthen the church there, is through not just being able to help in ways that we can help as they try and appeal these things. But also, you think about, why does the 1 in 10 endure? What is different about the one? Likely, the one endures because, man, they have people walking and shepherding them. And so we get to be a part of training and equipping those who are shepherding and discipling and walking with these believers, so that when persecution does arise, that they have local brothers who are being shepherds and being pastors and walking them through that. And we've seen just the Lord work in His Spirit move through kind of raising up and equipping pastors and leaders and future leaders. And just to see the church really be able to take ownership of their responsibility of caring for the persecuted and seeing the gospel go even to those areas where they know terrible things are going to happen.
Are there some qualities that you consistently see in those, the 1 out of the 10 that does endure persecution and stays faithful through that, versus those who walk away in times of trial? Are there some things you can point to and say, yeah, we really want to develop that?
Yes, there are. And I think it goes back to, again, some of the differences maybe between our part of the world and their part of the world. And again, maybe it's part of the individualistic thing, but we're very comfortable with, we talk about the immanence of Christ, that He's with us, He's our friend. And I think that's true. But I think sometimes what that can lead to...
And we process that as in an individualist culture, we process that as Christ is with me as an individual.
Yes. And
He's walking with me.
And that is true, but I think it can get to a point where it becomes like, I can put Christ in my pocket and I can put Him on the shelf. And when I need to, I can take Him down, I can carry Him with me, and then I can put Him away. And what I think we sometimes fail to think about is He is immanent and He is God with us. That is 100% true, but He's also this transcendent God. And when I think about Christ in the way that Revelation paints Him, as a warrior with flames for eyes and a sword coming out of His mouth and His robe dipped in blood, and I see this transcendent, powerful, mighty, great, terrifying reality of who Christ is. He is the lion and the lamb.
Right.
So I think having a proper balance of both of these things, but I think we err on the side of his immanence. And I think we need to think more about his transcendence, that he is a powerful God. And I think over there it's the exact opposite, man. They're okay with the spiritual world being this otherworldly, powerful, scary, terrifying thing. But I think those who endure are those who balance that reality out of what they know of the spiritual world with this new thing, and that is Christ in us, that he is near. And I think those who we've seen endure have embraced and balanced out the transcendence of God with, man, this is someone he's not like the spirits. He's good and he's kind and he's with me and he loves me and he's near to me. And it seems like every time you hear a testimony of someone who has endured the fire and the flames, they come out testifying of his nearness and his goodness. And I think, man, that's such a powerful picture that we can have as we balance it on the other end.
Right.
And we think about how mighty and majestic Christ is.
We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Brother Kevin. He and his family live and minister in Asia. Kevin, what are the biggest needs of the church? As we think about the church, as we pray for them, what are the biggest needs?
The first thing is I have taken a poll many, many times as I've interacted with some of the leaders of churches and asked them, what do you need from me? And by me, I mean the Western foreign, guy who's here. They've never asked for help in the area of evangelism. They haven't even asked for help in the area of church planting, although that's a big part of what we do. They always ask for the same thing, and they're asking for theological education. At the root of it, will you teach us the Bible? We don't have access to hardly any resources. We don't have Google that we can just look stuff up. We don't have a seminary. We don't have a pastor who's been a believer for 30 years. That we have nothing, and we're trying to, as faithfully as we can, shepherd this flock. The book of Hebrews talks about leaders watching over their soul. And we think about these guys who are out here who are shepherding these souls to greater intimacy with Christ, and they have just zero access to anything. And so the first thing I think, I would ask for prayer, and I think they would ask for prayer as well as you think about believers in this part of the world, is that those leaders would understand and fully bear the responsibility that they have of shepherding the local church, that they would see that, man, this is a task and responsibility that God has gifted them with, but also comes with, there's serious language that Paul and others use in Scripture of the responsibility that they have of shepherding the flock. Man, this is the bride of Christ, and as overseers and as elders, and they have a huge task. And so I think my prayer is that they understand to greater depths what that means and looks like. And then the second thing I would say, is for the flock themselves. If you keep reading that verse in Hebrews, it talks about our responsibility to submit to these leaders, not begrudgingly, but joyfully. And so I think that also extends to me as well. I'm not an elder. I'm not a local pastor. And so I think I can also demonstrate what submission to these guys looks like as the shepherd, as the leaders of these local churches. And so that the church would respond to these leaders who are leading and guiding and shepherding them to greater intimacy with Christ. I think for the church to respond to that in submission, joyful submission.
How does the sort of collectivist culture come into the church in that regard? Does that make it easier to submit to the leader, or does it make it harder to be the leader because normally everybody's sort of in this together, and now you're saying you're going to lead us?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think in all things there are neat pro things that you find, and then there are kind of maybe more difficult things that they're going to have to work through because of that. But what I have found is that there is a particular kind of unity that is expressed in the church that I long for as an American who grew up here and didn't necessarily get to experience. The way they rely on each other for more than just, a word of encouragement, but in many ways for their life.
My house just got burned down. I need a place to stay.
Yeah, I've got to be taken care of. When the body is hurt, when one member is hurt, to see the church actually respond in pain and in agony and in self-sacrifice for the sake of the member. And man, that's a beautiful thing that I am just so encouraged by. And I think part of that is maybe one of the effects of the collective mind that is more common in Asia, in that part of the world, that they respond in this way. When one person's hurting, we're all hurting. And I think we, on a philosophical level, will agree to that here, but it manifests much differently. It's encouraging. It's very encouraging.
Yeah. We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Brother Kevin. He and his family minister and work in Asia. What are the ways that VOM is helping in the ministry there?
Yeah, it's so neat. I mentioned those kind of local situations that, we just hear about all the time. And I'm thinking in my head of 2 or 3 specific ones where families that were displaced, driven out of their village, houses burned down. VOM has been able to, through cooperation with local believers, been able to find this one, specific situation, provide this family with land so that they could build a house, rice to eat. They are living in a tent in front of the police station.
Wow.
It's been neat to see the church take care of them, but so much of the church's ability to take care of them has been a result of the partnership with VOM and how they've come alongside the church there and offered to provide funds for food, funds for resources for them. And so lots of what you think are little things, but turn out to be extremely meaningful and impactful once you're on the ground seeing it firsthand, how VOM has come along to provide that support for these families who, again, are just walking through extremely difficult circumstances. And I think they're so encouraged that not just as their local people geographically around them that they know and love them, but man, these people on the other side of the world are like thinking about me and helping me. Who am I? I think it's so powerful for them to see that the church universal cares about them and loves them and knows their story and knows what they're experiencing. And we've seen just some incredible testimonies and heard powerful testimonies of how the Lord has used VOM and the church here to love and support those who are experiencing these things overseas. So it's a huge blessing, man. It's amazing.
I would encourage our listeners, that happens because people give to support VOM. You can give at vomradio.net. We would love to have you participate, and you can actually designate your gifts to go to help Christians driven from their homes to meet that specific need. Kevin, as we wrap up, is there anything else you would leave our mostly Western, mostly comfortable Christian audience with as we think about our brothers and sisters in Asia?
Yeah, this is one of those things. We've been over there for now, over a decade, but I still am American. I still come from Texas, and I still think about these things. And I feel like I have to constantly challenge myself. And if I'm having to do that, I can only imagine others living here would as well. To ask myself, do I really believe to live as Christ and to die as gain? We're probably not going to experience in the West the things that they experience. Probably no one's going to come kicking your door down and taking you off to jail. But Paul doesn't give qualifiers on that statement. And so I think, I would just want to encourage the church here, believers here, but also those who are living in other parts of the world as well. Just to think and dwell on, do I believe that that's true? Do I actually honestly believe that to live is Christ and to die is gain? Because I can be very comfortable, even in Asia, and I can start looking around and going, I kind of like this kingdom I've got, and I don't want to actually leave this. And so, I would just encourage us to think and dwell on that, to live as Christ and to die as gain. And I get to experience firsthand the joy of brothers and sisters who that statement is more literal than it will be for me. And the joy and the perseverance and the faith. I'm over there teaching them the Bible, but they're teaching us endurance and faithfulness and perseverance. And I want to be like that. And so for me, to live as Christ, and I want that to be true, to die is gain.
What a great challenge to end with. Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your heart. Thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you.
And I concur with your Brazilian friend. You're just getting started.
That's right. That's right.
We hope to have you back as you get further down the road in missions, in ministry. And I would encourage our listeners, as you are praying for Asia this week, as you're praying for Kevin and his family, you're praying for our brothers and sisters going through persecution, read that passage, consider that passage. To live as Christ, to die as gain. Lord, may that be true for all of us. And I hope you'll join us again next week. Every week we talk about what God is doing around the world, especially in restricted nations and hostile areas. You will come away encouraged. You'll also come away with a longer prayer list. So I hope you'll be back with us next week right here on the Voice of the Martyrs Radio Network.